Here we are, back together again, friends, for another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Jenny's back, and today we're going to talk about what we call food in another episode of I Don't Understand. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you are the caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes or have type 1 yourself, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey. This should take you about 10 minutes and will really help type 1 diabetes research. You can help right from your house at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group. Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes on Facebook. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. And later in this episode, we're going to be speaking with Heather, who will talk about the importance of education and understanding the impacts of hyperglycemia. MedtronicDiabetes.com/hyper. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Cozy Earth. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% off of the clothing, towels, sheets, off of everything they have at CozyEarth.com. Jenny, welcome back. We're going to do another I Don't Understand today.
Yay.
Today we're going to pick from your list again, and we think we're going to blend together 2 of your ideas off the list. But basically, we're going to talk about food.
Cool.
So we'll start with your I don't understand. You said, I don't understand why we call everything that we put in our mouth and eat food, which I took to mean you guys are eating some stuff you shouldn't be eating, and let's find out what that is. But what was your big idea? Like, and also let's be clear, you were traveling, you had a lot of free time, you were thinking about this, you got yourself upset.
And in travel, what do you see, especially when you're traveling in an airport or on an airplane? What do you see?
It's all prepackaged, like frozen stuff that they heat back up again, stuff I can take in a bag with me. And also it's 4 times the cost it would be if I bought it somewhere else. That's what I know.
Absolutely, 100%. But it's I guess what brought it to mind was the convenience factor. I understand we're busy. People are busy in today. But, I grew up thinking about food as something that I put in because my body needs nourishment, right? It's a basic necessity of life, just like water is.
Yeah.
And so as we've moved on in ages, more and more products have come to market. But that quote unquote food that we put in isn't always nourishing our body the way that we're supposed to be nourished.
Right.
We may be getting calorie value from it, which our body requires, but is it really providing all the nutrients that our body requires?
I don't
know.
Some, right? But not all, because they do pump that stuff full of they say they pump it full of vitamins, but I don't, you know what I mean? Like you don't
know.
You
flip
wonder, candy
right?
over and you're like, there's vitamin B in this? Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of an idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny too, because I'm making a supplement. I'm making a short series. I don't know if I told you this or not, but I went out to the Facebook group and I said, I don't care how crunchy it is or weird or anything. Tell me every supplement you take. And I ended up with a list of like 88 things that people use, right?
Wow.
So I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this list? So what I basically did was I go to the internet and I say like, I don't know, vitamin D, and I get a breakdown of it. This is what it does. This is what, this is what you can hope to get from it. Here are things you might want to be cautious about. Here's how it's generally dosed. And in like a 5-minute episode, I talk about vitamin D. And then I went to the next one and the next one and the next one. And what I thought was, People can listen and decide for themselves if this is something they want to look more into. But I find myself saying almost in every one, like, make sure you're getting a high quality vitamin. So I just was thinking, like, how high quality could it be if I'm putting it into like some processed food? Because I have to be able to say it's got some value nutritionally.
Correct.
Right.
And that's why, again, from a legal standpoint, products that have been really, really processed, meaning they took all the nutrient value out of them in the processing, then they have to be labeled as enriched and fortified, right? Because what they took out to be able to provide some nutrition value, they have to add back. And then your question is 100% valid.
Yeah.
What does our body do with something that's been synthetically added back to replace what was naturally there in the beginnings of what was really food?
Right. Probably not much. It's my
Right.
expectation. At Christmas last year, I bought a candy cane from this guy that makes them by hand, right?
Yeah.
So there was not like, so I'm like, okay, I wonder what a handmade candy cane tastes like. And I got it and it was fine. It was good. It wasn't super exciting or anything. But at least when I ate it, what I knew was this is an indulging thing here. I'm not joking myself into believing that there's something in this candy cane that is going to like benefit my overall health or well-being.
No.
Right. This is just sponge sugar mixed with whatever the hell
Food
else
coloring.
it is. Yeah. And that's it. I'm taking your point, right? Like things are packaged up in a way where you're like, well, this is food.
Right.
But like a cheeseburger from a fast food place is not you going to the grocery store buying
beef and making your burger.
Yeah, making a burger yourself. And I'm trying to use something that's, whether you make it yourself or not, like this is not an incredibly healthy decision one way or the other. But like still in our minds, they're both cheeseburgers. So they both have the same thing. And we think of them, I think, generally speaking, like it's the one we made ourselves. And so if you kind of extrapolate that out to Lunchables, for example, or something like that, or like lunch meat, is there a world where you'd ever go to a deli counter and buy like sliced turkey or ham or something like that? The podcast is sponsored today by the place where I get my sheets, my towels, some of my clothing, a lot of the things that I stay warm or comfortable with. CozyEarth.com. I'm wearing a pair of Cozy Earth joggers right now. I've recently gotten another pair in a different color. I sleep on Cozy Earth sheets. They are so comfortable and soft and temperate. Temperate meaning I'm never hot or cold, which is really saying something because my wife loves to turn that giant fan on, but they keep me nice and warm without making me like sweaty or moist. You know what I mean? You don't want to be moist while you're sleeping. And then, of course, the waffle towels I use every day to dry off my bits and parts after I've showered. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% off of your entire order. I'm not saying 40% off of one item. I'm saying 40% off of everything you put in the cart. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. Learn more about hyperglycemia at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper.
Well, hi, I'm Heather Lackey. I am a wife and mom. I have 2 children that are seniors in high school, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 34 years. And I'm a dietitian and a diabetes educator. I'm the director of global medical education. I lead a team of clinicians that are developing content.
How do you feel when your blood sugar's high?
Irritable, thirsty, hungry.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
See education working, see people thriving. That's kind of the fuel that feeds, my fire.
What would you like to see community members talk about more?
Hyperglycemia is the critical thing, right? That leads to short-term and long-term complications. Hyperglycemia is the greatest unmet need in the treatment of diabetes currently. And I think that that's where technology can help.
If you're having trouble with hyperglycemia and would like to talk to other people in the diabetes community, check out the Medtronic Champions hashtag or go to medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper.
We go to a place that actually has, do I buy sliced? I don't eat it. My kids don't eat it. My husband does eat turkey and chicken.
Mm-hmm.
But I go to a place that's actually farm.
Oh, okay.
So we have some place here that supplies stuff. I know where it came from. I could go visit the farm if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
I know what went into the product. And I know that that's from a standpoint of everybody's availability. That's not everywhere. I get that entirely. At a deli, you still have options. Your grocery store, you've got options in different deli cuts and different brands and things like that. And I think in terms of what I view as what should be called food, it should have the least amount of processing and the least amount of ingredients, right? Yeah. If you're getting deli chicken, what's in it? Can you read all the ingredients? How long was it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do a thing where I'll get a turkey breast from the store, and then I'll either bake it or smoke it and then slice it myself. But listen, I'm nowhere near where you are on all this. And I don't mean that like pejoratively, but like I look at deli meat and I'm like, oh, that can't be good. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it feels like it's been pressed together and it's just wrapped in plastic, and they unwrap it and they cut it and they put it back in, but they don't cover it up. And I'm like, that seems wrong to me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I just remember somebody telling me at some point that like salt and nitrates or something was very high in deli meats. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try to avoid that then. But you can look at that and just think it's turkey.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we've been, all along, I think we have set up the equation for people to incorrectly or understand that broad term of food, because we get math in school, we get how to read, we get, basically how to understand science, etc. But what we really should be getting as humans is a baseline of education from kindergarten through at least high school of nutrition.
What is food? Why am I eating
What is
it?
food?
Yeah.
What physiologically happens? Kindergarten, you learn the food groups. As the grades go on, what are the nutrients? What does that do in your body? Like your understanding of vitamin D, right? Is it a quality source? What does it actually do in your body? Why do I need it? I think we'd have a healthier overall society if we really understood food and its purpose in our body.
Yeah, but you made such a good point a moment ago, like the availability for people. So I just looked up, like, why do we process food? Preservation, safety to eliminate microorganisms, convenience, taste and texture. Who knew that? Processing can improve the taste of certain foods by adding ingredients like spices, sugars, or fats, and changing the texture. Food processing methods can change the texture of foods, making them more appealing or easier to consume. I have to tell you, I'm sure I've told you this in the past, but when my kids were little, I used to buy them frozen chicken nuggets. And then one day I was like, what am I doing? Like, why don't I just buy the chicken and cut it up myself and make my own nuggets? And the texture, my son bit into it and he goes, this isn't chicken. And I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like that's chicken. It really is. And he goes, no, that's not what this tastes like. The feeling in his mouth. So they can, if you process it, it says you can fortify it, concentrate nutrients. It's for mass production to feed large populations, cost effective, cultural and traditional practices like pickling and fermenting, but that's not what we're talking about. Of course, the drawbacks are nutrient loss, additives and preservatives, and then highly processed foods often contain little nutritional value and may contribute to poor health. So what starts out as, let me see how old I can sound here. Yeah. My grandmother used to buy tin cans of Charlie's chips. Do you know what that is? So
I don't know what
she would get. Okay, my boy, I guess I'm pretty old. Okay, here we go.
Either that or your grandmother did different things. I don't know.
You know, like the idea of like a holiday popcorn tin. A bucket, right? So when my grandmother went to the store to buy potato chips, her potato chips came in one of those bins from a company, and they were called like Charlie's Chips. And I'm betting if I could go back into a time machine, I would learn that Charlie's Chips were potatoes, salt, and fried in grease. And I'm
probably
right. And now, because this is the 70s, right? So, I mean, maybe not, but my expectation is that somewhere along the way, that's how my grandmother ate a potato chip the first time. And then eventually it became what it is now, right? And so when you stop and think about even I'm just going to say like a very popular nacho chip, we'll say that, right?
That's a good way to say.
Thank you.
Yes, very kind.
We all know, everyone who's been on this planet knows that if you lick whatever that is off that chip, you're like, this is so good. I don't even know what this is.
Right.
But I bet you if you broke it down, like in our minds, we're eating a corn chip with some like flavor on
cheese
it.
on, let's say. We think it's cheese, right?
It says nacho cheese on the bag. And so, but that is not what you're eating. You're not eating my grandmother's potato chip with a little bit of cheese on it or something like that.
No.
And so over time, that's happened to everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Everything.
Yeah.
Really. Even to the point where, you know, even the people will tell you, I was overseas and I heard somebody say recently I was overseas and I had a peach. I picked a peach off a tree. I ate a peach and I bit into it and I thought, this isn't what a peach tastes like. So like even our fruit and everything's modified in one way or another, right? Because it's the yield, right? But how much of that is about the size of our country? Because this takes us into your other I don't understand, which is why does the U.S. allow ingredients that other countries will outlaw?
Right. And I think that you actually, the peach story reminds me, years ago for an anniversary, my husband and I went to France. And it was a little like grocery store, like around the corner. And we went and we got a couple of things. And one of them was yogurt. Mm-hmm. And I opened the yogurt and it looked different. And I tasted it. And we ate yogurt so much while we were there. It was the tastiest yogurt. Honest, it's the peach story, really. It was, my goodness, like this is not Americanized yogurt. And it tasted like just really good. I don't even know what the difference in it, but it was really, you cannot, and I don't really eat very much dairy now. So maybe there are some things that are on the market that are similar enough, but I mean, it was very different. And so that brought in that other thought, like, I don't understand why, despite having smaller populations in area, Europe is still a really big place.
It's not. They're not feeding 20 people, right? They're smaller and they have a smaller population, but they still have to cover their population with the size of their industry. So
right.
So it's
so
probably
I just don't
about
understand.
Money. No,
it could be, but then why are we like? Don't we want our U.S. people to healthy people? Right? Do you know, that's my problem.
You're confusing someone sitting on the board of directors somewhere is like, how much money are we making this month? With
right.
Yeah. It's like everything else. Listen, social media is a great example, right? Like, you know, because you and I, before we started recording, Jenny was listing out her gripes with the world. And
I don't understand.
Yeah. And listen, the first time you open up Instagram or TikTok, you go, oh, wow, my God, it's pictures of everybody, blah, blah, blah. The 10th time you do it, you're like, I'm good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've seen this already. So how do we up the ante to keep you coming back to the app? I think that's what happens with the food as well, right? Like, let's just keep upping the flavor, put more fat in it, more sugar, more salt, like so that you're just like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Those are the top three. If you look into any food science, I mean, there are lots of different books all about it, right?
Yeah.
Super Size Me, all of those different options to look at. They focus on those three ingredients: sugar, salt, and fat.
Yeah.
And the food industry has figured out how to marry them to the point that they are addicting.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell people the thing you told me that we looked up to see if it was true and it looks like it might be?
Sure.
That in 1988, Philip Morris bought Kraft Foods, acquired Kraft Foods, a major food conglomerate. So so basically a tobacco company that made cigarettes was like, hey, let's buy a food company. And a couple years earlier, it looks like RJ Reynolds bought Nabisco.
Yep.
So then there's reasons that it might make sense, you know, for them to diversify like that. Obviously, they had to shift away from tobacco because it was becoming less, you know, palatable.
I mean, if you really think about it, then do you really want, are those the people that you want putting quote unquote food in your mouth?
Well, they're money people.
That's where it's hard.
Yeah, but that's but they're money people when you stop and think about it. Like, they were in the cigarette business. They had something that, you know, they made that was really addictive. And they were probably like, hey, people aren't smoking as much. They're not going to stop eating. Why don't we shift over here and keep going? And obviously it worked out pretty well.
Absolutely.
For them, but not for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Look at the health of our country, right?
Right.
We've got phenomenal emergency care, but why? It's because as a nation, we've continued to get sicker and sicker.
Mhm.
And that's atrocious for all of the knowledge that we have.
But then that same money will probably just go buy like a healthcare system.
Sure. And new
then-
medications and new things that put Band-Aids on the problems that could easily be fixed by people just
Eating
eating
differently.
an apple.
Yeah. So we went on, by the way, if you're listening and this is your life, don't get mad at us. Like, I mean, like,
no.
we're not blaming you. This is the situation. Like, I mean, honestly, I thought you said it a minute ago. I think it's worth repeating. Convenience, cost, etc. Society is set up like this to support this kind of food now. You can't just to just dash off and go, I'm not going to be involved in this anymore. Like, people probably don't have the knowledge of where to start. You grew up with your mom making food that she grew, like, so you have some knowledge about it, right, and how to handle it. You're predisposed to do those things. But if I just asked you to, if you didn't grow up that way, and I just asked you in your 40s to just shift all of a sudden, like, hey, Jenny, go start making your own yogurt. All you need is a goat. And you'd be like, hey, listen, what happens. All right. Oh,
I did. Years ago, actually, I bought a yogurt maker after I did. You were laughing. It's funny.
Oh, you were going to say goat.
No. Although we have toyed with buying our own chickens and just because we can have chickens, but we've not done that.
No doubt in my mind that you've thought about buying chickens. None at all.
They have the best eggs. They're fresh. They're always there.
I would love that. Listen, we went on I've said on the podcast so people might know, but like we went on a family vacation for the first time in years recently. And we went off to like a warm location on an island and just sat around for a week. And my kids came, Kelly, myself, and my son's girlfriend. And we got home and we weren't home for like 48 hours. And my son goes, hey, the entire time we were on that island, I got up, ate, went to the bathroom. Everything was as normal as could be. And I'm home 24 hours and my stomach's upset. Like, just like that. He's like, it's the food, right? Because he's like 24. He's like, right? Like, am I seeing this correctly? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know exactly how, but I think so.
Yeah.
So.
Especially if the food on the way home, travel wise, again, as we started out talking about, travel food is really hard on your system. Travel in and of itself is hard on your system. Most people get dehydrated when they're traveling, especially through flight. So absolutely, he's right.
I remember the first time that I said to you, like, I don't understand when you're on a long car trip and you stop for gas, you don't get food. And you were like, no. And I was like, well, where does the food come from? You were like, I bring it from home. And I was like, oh, fascinating.
I know, you looked at me like I was a crazy lady.
I was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. But no, yeah. So Cole's input was, from his own personal experience, was even though we were eating in restaurants every day usually, but we did shop at the grocery store. But in fairness, the grocery store there was insanely expensive.
I'm sure.
But still, he's like, my stomach was like great the whole time we were there. And he's like, I got home and like, he's like, I'm not eating crazy stuff in my opinion. And I don't feel well all of a sudden. And so, I mean, listen, I'm not a doctor, right? Or anything, but it's got to be this. It's what's in the food. Like and then we run around patching up problems and I grew up in this, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I was like really broke growing up. So we ate like garbage food, like whatever was available stuff. And I actually grew up with people who thought that like, some of that packaged food, which I'm sure in that time, a lot of people thought they saw it as like amazing. They were like,
sure.
You know what I mean? Like there's a cookie, it comes in a bag. You don't have to bake it. Isn't that insane? Like that kind of thing.
Or TV dinners. Let's bake it in aluminum foil. And
oh my God. Yeah. The turkey with the fake gravy and the fake stuffing. See, now you said that and I'm like, oh, why don't they make those anymore? Those were good. And right away I was like, oh, awesome.
I remember those, the gravy.
Yeah, the gravy was like thin. You'd like whip it up a little bit, try to make something happen. The potatoes were like hard to put into words.
Potatoes.
No,
I don't know what they were, but
you'd put some butter and salt and pepper on them. You're like, this is passable.
Well, I remember the first time I had potatoes at a friend's house. I had gone for dinner, and her mom was also, she wasn't the cook that my mom was. She did the best that she could, but she had mashed potatoes, and I tasted them, and I was like, I ate them because I was very polite. That's just, I was raised that way. And I came home and I was like, Mom, I don't know what you do different with your potatoes, but we had potatoes that were supposed to be mashed potatoes. And I was like, they were like wet and sort of like they were just really, really soft.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, they were probably boxed powdered potatoes. I was like, what are powdered potatoes? Like, I'm used to seeing my mom like chop them up, boil them, smash them, blend them up, whip them with the beater and put butter, and those are mashed potatoes to me.
Maybe even a little sour cream in there to rich them up. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, you've now, again, this is really interesting. You've like fired off young Broke Scott memories. Those boxed mashed potatoes, if you made them thicker, if you didn't put as much liquid in them, they were awesome. But I know they're not. I know if you gave it to me right now, I'd be like, I don't know what this is. I don't want this. But as a kid growing up, I don't know. Like it's one of my memories. Listen, we say this all the time here. I don't know if we say this. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast or not. But my wife, like, she eats well because we're older now and she understands. But if you asked her to go pick the things that really fire off the memory centers for her, it's like she grew up in a trash can. Like the stuff that really, like, she's like, oh, this, like, I'm seriously like
she doesn't listen to this, so I won't tell her.
Like a garbage person. Like she, if you left her to her own devices, she'd be like, oh my God. And she'd say things that you'd be like, those aren't real foods, but it's the stuff she remembers from being a kid.
Sure.
I guess it just sticks to you. I have some stuff here. I asked ChatGPT why the U.S. allows food additives that other countries have outlawed. It says,
I'm curious.
Some reasons might be regulatory framework differences.
But right there, regulatory framework differences. Right there is Europe does it better because the citizens, I just feel like the citizens are like, I'm not eating this and we don't want our citizens eating this. Why do we want our Americans? Like, don't we care about each other?
Yeah. The two entities, the FDA and the EFSA, use different criteria and processing for evaluating food additives. The U.S. tends to rely more on industry-provided safety data and they wouldn't lie about this. It has a higher threshold for banning substances, whereas the EU often applies what they call a precautionary principle, meaning that substances can be banned if there's even a potential for harm, even if the science isn't definitive.
Right.
So
look at all the food colorings.
Yeah. Well, so
it's an easy one.
What you're just hearing here is there's a referee, and in Europe, the referee goes, I'm going to side on the side of the people eating the food. And our referee goes, I'm going to side on the side of the people making the food. Now, why could that be? Well, because lobbying and an economic interest, the food and chemical industries in the U.S. are powerful and have significant influence over regulatory processes through lobbying. So they're making the food and the rules about how the food is okayed.
And who's lobbying for your food? Who did you say from 1988?
Yeah, it might be, or it could be an old tobacco company.
Right? Come on. I mean, let's be
a
smart.
Cookie company. I guess you're right. My God.
Right? I just want people to be smart. That's just it.
I want everyone to know that before we started recording, Jenny told me she made her own baby food for her kids.
I did. Well, I was eating it anyway. What's right? I mean, why?
I mean, like, you got put on the right first foot as a kid.
True.
And you stuck with it. Also, you stuck with it probably a little bit because of how you were raised, but also I think because you got diabetes too when you were a kid. So it was probably easier on you to eat real food too.
Right.
I mean, listen, there's no doubt that a lot of the conversations that people have, in the Facebook group and everything, they're like, I mean, they're eating stuff that I'm like, if you ate something different, this would definitely be easier. Now, I'm not into telling people how to eat because of all the things that we've listed here, finances and, I mean, they could be addicted to it by now, like, whatever. Like, there's 1,000 reasons why people are eating the way they are. I want them to be able to cover their food well with insulin and not,
correct,
compound issues. But the truth is the simpler the food, the simpler the ingredients, the simpler the bolusing should be as well.
For the most part, correct. Absolutely. And, there is no lie in that there are food deserts. And when they talk about food deserts, we're not talking about there's no food available. But in the beginning of this, like defining the word food, right? There's truly no real food available in a food desert. there are things that provide calories, fats, proteins, sugars.
Yeah.
But are they really providing quality in which food in itself should provide?
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's back to your original point. Like, I don't understand why we're allowed to call all of this food.
Right.
Right. Because it's not, there's nothing, it's food-ish, maybe.
Right.
But you're saying that there are people who live in places where their only option for breakfast is Captain Crunch or something like that. And, and their stuff is, everything they're able to buy is boxed or processed. It's easy to say, like, I mean, listen, it really is easy to say, don't buy anything in a bag or a box. You'll probably be better off. But how are people supposed to accomplish that when the world's been now set up this way for them? So that's really probably the biggest thing, is that in Europe, where we're talking about in other places, their lives are set up differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. Yes. Like, if anybody who works in America and has an office overseas, you'll hear them complain like, man, they take off a lot. Or like, when they go on vacation, they have a baby. Like in Canada, like I work with this lovely woman who like I met and like we were starting to build up a rapport. And then she's like, well, I'll see you next year. I'm having a baby. I'm like, what? Yeah. Like she had a baby.
They get a year maternity leave in Canada, and then they will reserve at least when I was working with a couple of people who I worked with for pregnancy in Canada, a year maternity leave paid, at least to some degree. And they will reserve your job for you unpaid for another year following that.
Yeah. No, listen, my wife was riding the train right up until like Cole was coming out, trying to save up time to be with the baby after he was here. Right. But my point is that if their society runs differently, then maybe they have more time to come home and make chicken nuggets out of a piece of real chicken, is my point. Yeah. So you can't blame it's not a blame game. It's like, it's the way we set the country up is it put us in a situation now.
Right. I guess what made me really think about it as I don't understand is hoping to bring to light that there are some things that maybe people can start to think about, right? In considerations, especially if you have the ability to do so. The smallest little changes can lead to another change, can lead to some improvement. And we're all talking about diabetes management here. The simpler the ingredients, the less the ingredients, the more they're real food ingredients.
Yeah.
Honestly, everybody wants it to be a bit easier and less cumbersome to navigate blood sugar after food intake.
Right. And you hear so many people with type 1 talk about like they have digestion issues. And we've talked about that before, but like, is it because you're trying to digest,
who knows?
Cardboard that's in something? Like, I mean, listen, this artificial colors and sweeteners, some food additives that are banned in other countries, such as certain artificial dyes and sweeteners, remain widely used in the U.S. due to their low cost and long established use. While these ingredients have raised health concerns, like links to hyperactivity in children and cancer risks, the FDA maintains that they are safe at current consumption levels. But it goes on here to talk about it just picks a certain ingredient to make a point with, and it just struck me. Brominated vegetable oil, BVO, is an emulsifier in some sodas. Now, I bet you when you drink a soda, you think, well, the liquidy part's water. That for sure. Unless it's brominated vegetable oil. Like, what? It's banned in Europe, but allowed in the U.S. despite concerns about its effects on health. Its approval has not been reversed, in part because the industry lobbying and slow regulatory response. So, every time you pay a soda company, they take a couple for themselves and a couple to fight about so they can keep selling you more soda. I'll have a soda sometimes, and I know when I'm drinking them, I'm like, this is not good for me. But I sometimes see people go down the soda aisle in the grocery store, and they have so much soda in their cart. Like, and I'm not one of those people, but part of you just wants to grab them and go, please don't.
Please don't.
Yeah. Like that can't be right. You know what I mean?
The biggest time that I see very big carts full of soda or that type of thing, it's usually around the time of the big sporting events, right? Where you're celebrating the Super Bowl or some big sporting celebration, the 4th of July, any of those things where, you got to drink something. Heaven forbid you would just drink water because it's so hard to find.
Well, I want to stick up for other people. Water sucks. You know why? Because it tastes like nothing. But my point is, but to not joke about it, there's an example of I need to be hydrated, right? And a glass of soda is not going to hydrate me the same way an equivalent glass of water would.
Right.
But like a baby, I'm but I want it to taste good. And by the way, if we had more time, we could relate that back to your thought, which was, hold on a second.
Oh, no.
Why are we... Jenny was off on a tangent earlier. Why are we afraid to feel emotions? How come people think they always need to be happy?
Happy to the nth degree happy, right?
But I'm putting that on myself about water. Just drink it and shut up, and now you're not thirsty anymore, and go on your business. Right. Take a nice pee, it'll be over.
Right.
Here's some other examples of additives allowed in the U.S. but banned elsewhere. Potassium bromate, which is used in bread products in the U.S. but banned in the EU, Canada, and other countries due to concerns about carcinogens. So keep in mind, too, even bread. I have a bread maker I'll make bread in. It goes bad pretty quickly because there's no preservatives in it. But it does not taste like whatever bread from a store tastes like at this point. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's completely different. RBGH, recombinant bovine growth hormone, is allowed in the U.S. for dairy cows to increase milk production, but banned in the EU and other regions because of its potential health risks for the cows and the humans. And then something here I can't even... Azodicarbonamide, a dough conditioner used in bread in the U.S. but banned in Europe and other countries due to its links to respiratory issues. So when I make bread, it's flour, salt, butter, a little bit of sugar. I think
Do you use yeast or no?
Yes, yeast. That's it. That should be it. I think that's the 5 ingredients. I don't have a dough conditioner in it called azodicarbonamide.
No.
So, all right. So why are we allowed to call this stuff food, Jenny?
Right. Did we answer my question? That these aren't food. They're not food.
I mean, I think I don't want to sound like a conspiracy nut, but it sounds like to me that the answer is money.
Regulatory, being fed by the money.
I was just going to stop at money. Seems like money's the answer. But yeah, so companies own stuff. They want to make more money. They find ways to do this. Now, the other thing is you wonder, how many scientists did we have to hire until somebody figured out that recombinant bovine growth hormone made cows make more milk? I don't know. I don't know what the other I'd love to hear the other side of the argument. What's the other side? Where are we going to get enough cows to make milk?
Yeah.
Also, I would imagine this. I'll sound old again for a second. There are 9 different types of milk in my grocery store. 9 different brands from different companies. I bet you if it wasn't so easy for me to grab milk, that when I poured it, I would take exactly the amount I was going to use and no more. Come on. Everyone's filled up their cereal bowl, eating their cereal, and when they're done, there's a big pool of milk at the bottom, right? That was extra milk you didn't need. Jenny doesn't eat cereal, but if she did, she'd understand what we were talking about. My point is that I want things to be readily available for everybody, but maybe there's that feeling of it's there so I can have more of it or I can waste it. There's nothing special. You know what I mean?
That could be. Yeah. And, commodity food, obviously, right? I mean, a lot of the public school systems get sort of their food comes from more commodity types of options so that it's not as expensive to feed. Thankfully, we have public school food systems because there would be a lot of kids who wouldn't get 1 or even 2 meals a day, unfortunately, right? They're needed. I see the other side of it entirely. I do. But my bigger picture is, why can't we just clean it up for everybody? I don't understand how we can think that it's okay to keep things so unhealthy. People are getting rich in a way by keeping other people
sick.
Yeah. And it makes me really sad.
Yeah. Or on just the wrong path that eventually catches up to them. Right. Yeah. No, I listen, I can remember crystal clear. I went to the grocery store with my grandmother once and she died when I was 13. So I was pretty young. This is a long ass time ago is what I'm saying, 40 years ago or more. And she's just going through the aisle and her ice cream that she liked was there. She was so excited. And I was like, I couldn't understand why she was so excited. I said, why are you so excited? And she goes, oh, they don't always have it. So I don't get it that often. And I was like, oh, okay. But now there's like, I don't know how long a grocery store aisle is. I mean, it's got to be a couple 100 feet, right? Don't you think? I mean,
I don't even know. I have no idea. I know what you're talking about.
I have in my grocery store, there is a full aisle of just ice cream.
Yes. And bars and cakes and cookie ice cream and
in a 6-foot tall container, a couple 100 feet long from 40 different companies, ice cream. It's always there. It's never not there. It's always full. As a matter of fact, if you take a couple out, somebody runs out and shoves a couple back in.
And you'll notice that they're not all called ice cream because legally they can't be. Did you know that?
Yeah, no, I know.
There's a difference between dairy treats and ice cream.
Dairy treats. That sounds like a cow fart. When you go to the movie theater and you go to put butter on your popcorn, it's called buttery flavored topping. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. It's oil.
Oh, yeah. And it's not good oil.
It's not even good.
Not like, this is olive oil.
It's not like the cheese dust on that very famous like chip where you're like, you know what? This might be giving me cancer, but this is awesome. It's not like that. It's like you put it on the popcorn. You go, oh, I just ruined $900 worth of popcorn with this oil.
See, if you're like Jenny, you take a big bag with you and you have your own popcorn in the bag and nobody checks it anymore.
My wife makes fun of me when I do that.
Oh, I do that. I'm like, I put, drinks in there too, like water bottles. I'm like, there's no reason. We just paid like $80 to come to these movies. We're not buying.
You're not going to buy $50 worth of popcorn and water, bottles of water? No. Yeah. All right, Jenny, listen, anyway. I don't know the answer other than I think the answer is money and people trying to make money. But I'll tell you this, if you hear this and you get upset by it, I'm very, very clearly not I don't talk about political stuff on the podcast. No. But, people have power, but they only have power when they're united and
in big groups. That's right.
If you are waiting for 5 people in a boardroom to decide that your health means more than profits, you might want to wait on something else. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, you will be out of luck. So make your own choices. Read your labels.
Yeah. And eat like Jenny. Just make, smush up carrots and give them to your babies or whatever. My God. All right.
Pretty easy in a blender, Anyway.
I appreciate this very much. Thank you. Prolonged hyperglycemia can lead to serious health problems and long-term complications. Learn more at medtronicdiabetes.com/hyper. This episode of the podcast was sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. Huge thanks to Cozy Earth for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% off of your entire order. If you're living with diabetes or are the caregiver of someone who is, and you're looking for an online community of supportive people who understand, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. There are over 41,000 active members, and we add 300 new members every week. There is a conversation happening right now that would interest you, inform you, or give you the opportunity to share something that you've learned. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. And it's not just for Type 1s. Any kind of diabetes, any way you're connected to it, you are invited to join this absolutely free and welcoming community. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would. I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu. And you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. All right, kids, we're done. We're at the end. Just do me one last favor. If you can, if you could, please. If you have the need or the desire for something that one of the sponsors is providing, please use my links or my offer codes. They help the show so much. And that means me. You're helping me to make this podcast every day. You're helping me to support the private Facebook group, do all the things that I'm doing. I'm not asking you to buy something you don't want or something you don't need. But if you're going to get one of these items, use my links or my offer codes. They help me a ton. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting. I really do genuinely appreciate it. I'll be back very soon with another episode. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.